Welcome to Sports Cards once again. Currently, in the minds of many sports cards collectors, PSA and BGS reign supreme as the most respected card grading companies, with the likes of SGC, HGA, and others trailing behind but making strong efforts to get themselves competing with those big boys. But there is a couple of reasons worth considering CSG if you are looking to get your cards slabbed for long-term investment. Most noteworthy of all is their push to become the premier grading company in the Chinese sports card market. In this video, we'll take a bit of a dive into this and consider it more fully. Now this video is actually being created out of a request from a viewer, so if you have any requests for other videos, please let me know. I'm always thinking of different content to create for you guys, so if you have a good idea, let me know and please do subscribe. Now in the current sports card grading market reality, a highly graded PSA or BGS tends to fetch much more money on the open market than a similarly high graded SGC, HGA, or CSG card. But will this always be the case? There isn't anything near consensus among sports card collectors that PSA or BGS are actually better or more accurate at grading, yet their card values remain for the most part higher than other slabs. But why? In the simplest terms, the reason PSA and BGS are valued higher is because collectors and investors have decided to say they are. That's really about it. Their value is perceived as higher. Narratives are created that express that their value is higher, and then like a self-fulfilling prophecy, they sell higher on the market. But I really don't think that this is a recipe for long-term success in a market like the sports card grading market that is only becoming increasingly competitive, and where the actual quality of the service provided from one company to another isn't necessarily that much better or worse. If you ask who among these companies actually grade cards more accurately and fairly, an objective exploration will lead you to say, I don't know, all of them sometimes, none of them sometimes? In many cases, the accuracy of the company depends on the specific grader and how effective his morning coffee was, how well he slept last night, and all sorts of other human factors. As such, you could just as easily get a perfectly graded card from PSA as you could from SGC, or you could just as easily get a severely misgraded card from either as well. And while companies like PSA and BGS do make efforts to try to keep themselves at the top of the pile, there is really nothing to suggest that they will always remain there. Things change, always happens, and each of the trailing companies is laying out a path in front of themselves to try to be the new king of the hill. There's plenty that could be discussed about SGC or HGA in regards to their forward momentum, but in the rest of this video, we're going to be focusing our attention specifically on CSG for a couple of very specific reasons. Now first, who is CSG? Now it's interesting to note that CSG, or Certified Sports Guarantee, has only been in the sports card grading game since early 2021. Yeah, that's right, like 2021 AD. The first sports card ever slabbed by CSG was sold shortly after it was slabbed with a 9.5 score for a hefty $98,100 on March 11th, 2021, like yesterday practically. But this newness to the sports card world doesn't mean CSG is new to the grading game in general. CSG is just the sports card arm of CCG, or Certified Collectibles Group, who is one of the most well-respected grading companies in the world in other collectibles areas. CCG is the PSA of the comic book world, maybe even higher up the ladder in that realm than PSA is in the sports card world at the moment. And their grading in coins, stamps, and paper money is considered to be among the most respected and trusted of all grading companies. Their arm that launched to grade trading cards like Pokemon and Magic the Gathering came out the gate strong, and despite their newness in that space, they are already one of the premier graders for collectors to consider. All this is to say that quality-wise, there is no reason to think that CSG isn't bringing it. The quality of their work is clear. The professionalism of what they are doing is equally clear. Knowing all this, and knowing they've only been in the sports card market since early 2021, this already makes them seem like a really good grading company to consider if you're looking for a good company to submit your slabs to. But there's another thing to consider here that not many seem to really consider, and that is CSG's global reach, specifically in relation to China. Now, in a recent video, I went into some detail about my experiences as a sports card collector residing in China, and within that video, I mentioned how CSG has been making inroads into China that other grading companies just don't seem to be taking. Now, in that video, I considered a few different ways in which the sports card market in China is actually affecting the sports card market in the US and elsewhere in recent years, as card collecting has taken roots quite deeply in the country here. But in relation to card grading, that is where this video will be taking us next. While PSA and BGS have rooted themselves deeply in the US as the premier grading companies, they have not done so in China. It's possible to submit your cards in China to PSA within the country, but then those cards are shipped to PSA's central headquarters in the US, and they get piled in with a long, seemingly never-ending waiting list. Why would a Chinese sports card collector choose to go this route, especially when PSA isn't really even such a big deal over here? PSA hasn't rooted themselves deeply in the market here at all, so it's not worth all that trouble. I mean, you can still find PSA slabs for sale here, but they're really relatively rare, even as graded cards gradually become a little more common over time in the market. And most of the ones that are PSA graded are probably not people actually submitting their cards for grading. It's some of the sellers, some of the buyers who are buying on eBay and having them shipped across the world to them. There's not a lot of people sending their cards to PSA from China. As such, in China, the market for sports card grading companies is wide open, Wild West kind of wide open. A number of small-scale Chinese grading companies have popped up to try to get a spot in the Chinese sports card market, but due to them not being recognized outside of China, more serious collectors in China don't really aim for them, as they realize that it's likely that they may be selling their cards outside of just the Chinese sport market at some point. But CSG, at the same time as they were opening their sports card grading arm in the US, were simultaneously doing the exact same thing in China. As CSG opened its doors in the US, it was also opening its doors in China. In February 2021, CSG had already partnered with Fansmall in China to streamline and simplify the grade submission process for collectors in China. As the sports card market in China continues to grow, Fansmall has positioned itself in a healthy spot to be able to be a core part of the sports card market ecosystem in the country. Now, whereas PSA and BGS, in their minor efforts to do more in the Chinese sports card market, are basically just banking on their clout outside of China, which is very unlikely to work in a market like China, CSG seems to be approaching things in a bit more of an organic way and trying to grow within the natural patterns of the continually growing sports card market in the country. Now, whether this actually means anything in the long term is yet to be known, as it's all very new, but it does seem like CSG's approach, together with its genuine international reach and well-respected service, is well positioned to be the premier grading card company in China sometime down the road. But if that happens, what would that mean outside of China, and particularly with the perceived value in the US market? Since we identified previously, the main thing that keeps one company's grading at a higher value than others is perceived value that many collectors and investors have something resembling a consensus about. Well, that's definitely hard to say and impossible to know, but it is possible to see a reality where CSG graded cards begin to be seen more and more in the US market, if they are actually able to do what it seems they are trying to do in China and become the grading company of choice in this market. Cards in the Chinese market make their way into the US market very regularly, especially considering the global reach of eBay in particular, meaning in this scenario, CSG cards will be making their way into the US market more and more regularly. If that happened, and if the grading service they are actually offering only continues to be seen as well respected and reputable, then it seems to me CSG would only become a bigger and bigger part of the card grading conversation in the US as well. And once a grading company becomes a bigger and bigger part of that conversation, then it seems quite likely that their perceived value will increase over time as well. This is especially true in the US right now, at a time when the card grading market is more open for the emergence of underdogs than it has been for a long time. The BGS backlog is so massive that it's almost comedic. The PSA backlog is forcing the lower end price tiers to be non-existent for at least some period of time. And then you have the likes of SGC clawing their way up the mountain trying to get themselves right there with the big boys. But then here is CSG, moving forward slowly and surely and with a whole hell of a lot of financial strength due to their diversified collectibles focuses and their international reach. And it seems entirely possible they have amongst the strongest foundations for solid growth into the future. Now, saying all this, does this mean I think you should stop submitting your cards to PSA and immediately start using CSG exclusively? No, not at all. I am not suggesting that at all. But what I am suggesting is that it's important to analyze the realities of the market so as to become more aware of what may be on the horizon. Any sports card investor knows that understanding what is coming next is the most important thing to making a profit in a hobby as speculative as sports card collecting can usually be. All that I have said here may mean nothing in the grand scheme of things. PSA may get its poop together, it may figure out kinds of unique and creative ways to make the grading process more streamlined and easy, or another company may burst onto the scene with some technology that puts grading card accuracy of all other companies to shame. Who knows what's going to happen exactly, but this element of CSG's forward momentum building is something worth keeping an eye on. With all that being said, please do subscribe to this channel, like, comment, all that good stuff. This is a very new channel and I'm throwing tons of effort into it, but to keep this going, I really need you to be with me on this journey of building this channel. It can't happen without you. I appreciate you. Check you next time.